realistic target for the Gunners this summer? All of that and more to come on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. Good to see plenty of you with us. And some more positive stuff to talk about. It feels like it's kind of been really doom and gloom lately around Arsenal. And I know I say this quite a bit recently, but, there's been quite a big fallout to the fact that we've fallen out of the title race. And there's been a big fallout to the January window. And that fallout continues and sort of lingers on, which is not ideal and not great. And it certainly doesn't help the mood around the place. I think everybody's feeling a little bit flat at the minute. I certainly am. But, you can rest assured that I think the club are behind the scenes working hard and doing all the right things to try and get us back into better shape and put us in a position where next season we can hopefully kick on. And I know people keep saying, well, next season. It's always next season with this team. And I get that. But that's the great thing about football. There's always next season. We're going to talk about some more positive stuff today because we've had some news with regards to the club preparing to open formal talks with one of their biggest stars over a new contract, which is, again, the club being proactive on the whole contract front, which I really, really like. And that's been one of the, for me, most notable improvements in recent years. And we're going to talk about a player that I'm sure most Arsenal supporters would love to see arrive in the summer, Alexander Isak. Now, for a while, we've been told it's not realistic. Newcastle don't need to sell. Newcastle won't sell. Why would anybody leave Newcastle, who are on the up, in the opinion of some, to join Arsenal, who have had their peak under Mikel Arteta, according to Jamie Carragher, and who are now regressing? Well, I think that's a load of old rubbish. And so we're going to break down why I believe that Alexander Isak is a realistic target for the summer. We'll talk a little bit about the reasons why, and we'll get some of your thoughts and takes from the live chat box as well, which is always really, really important. Let me say a few hellos because there's a fair few of you in the live chat with us right now. Big hello to Tamina, who says Alexander Isak wants to join Arsenal over Liverpool. I don't know. I don't know if that's right, but it would be nice, wouldn't it, if he was to sort of snub Liverpool. Let's say he is on the move come the summer and he was to snub them and join us. Lots of hellos. We've got Steve, we've got Junior, we've got Lauren, who says, first time catching you live. Love it. I had the pleasure of watching him play at the weekend. He is, in my opinion, the best striker in the league at the minute. I think you're absolutely spot on. There's a really good question from Jid, which I'm going to favorite and I'm going to come back to a little bit later on in the pod because I do want to start with the Bukayo Saka stuff. Now, let me bring you up to speed with exactly what's been reported. So on Tuesday, around about late morning time, Sami Mokbel, now of BBC Sport, reported that Arsenal are set to open formal talks with Bukayo Saka over a new contract as he enters the final 2 years of his current deal. Arsenal want to avoid any uncertainty regarding his future, and so extending his contract is, and I quote, a top priority. He last, of course, signed a deal with the club back in 2022, which is understood to be worth a minimum of £10 million per season. There might be some bonuses on that. There might be some add-ons on that. I don't know the exact in and outs of it, but the process to try and extend the contract is due to accelerate in the near future. Now, this is really, really positive news. Okay, we've got to do the negotiation and we've got to get the deal done before we can celebrate it. But the fact that, as I mentioned right at the top, Arsenal are proactive again, it is really, really encouraging to me. I grew up, adoring Arsene Wenger and everything that he'd built. And I loved sort of some of the players that he unearthed from all sorts of different parts of the world and would bring them to North London, and they thrive and they do great. And often my heart broke when we had to lose those players, whether it be because they fancied a move abroad to someone that was more likely to, for instance, win the Champions League or whatever, or whether it was towards the back end of Wenger's tenure when we started to lose some of our very best players due to a lack of progress on the contract front. And, you think about sort of people like Cesc Fabregas, he put us in a position where we were kind of forced to sell him. Maybe had we been a bit more proactive, we would have been, I'm not saying we would have stopped it happening because I think he always wanted to go to Barcelona, but would we have been in a better position to fight back and say, no, we want fair value for this player? And would we have put the player in a position where he couldn't essentially do what he did, which was angle for the move and force the move in a lot of ways? If we were in a better position contractually, would we have protected ourselves against that kind of thing? The same with Robin van Persie. You know, he says that the club didn't even offer him a contract renewal. And when they did, it was nowhere near what he felt was fair game. And, you know, that's why I not celebrate, but quite enjoy reading stories like this, because it tells me that Arsenal as a football club have their finger on the pulse. That Arsenal as a football club are going to be proactive, and they're not going to allow those situations that plagued us in the past to develop again and put us in a position where we're having to lose our biggest stars on the cheap because we didn't get our asses in gear early enough to make sure that they had a contract, and not only a contract that gives them a guarantee of a lot of money, but also that protects us. That's really, really important as a football club. Yeah, you got to cater for both sides, but you know, you've got to first and foremost, I think, protect yourselves. And we didn't do that. We didn't do that well enough in the past. And so when I hear stuff like, you know, entering into the final 2 years and bang, it's as if that automatically triggers a discussion and a conversation in the beginning of negotiations, that makes me feel really good. And that makes me feel really comfortable about the position we find ourselves in. Look, Bukayo Saka is going to want and deserves a mega contract. And I think this is the bit that maybe goes under the radar a little bit when we're looking at things from a kind of fan perspective. So I was quite upset at the fact that the club had decided to kind of raise season ticket prices again. And one of the things that um, was kind of reported was that a lot of that was to do with the increase in the wage bill. And the wage bill is always going to increase. The more successful you are, the better your players are, the higher their status in the game, the more you're going to have to pay them to be competitive. And what you can do is you can cheap out. And we've seen other clubs do that in the past. And a player who's certainly worth top dollar has been on a sort of mid-range salary. And because they're in a contract, they've had to just kind of shut up and put up. But Arsenal have recognized that that ain't going to work. Like, that's not the way to do things. You don't let someone whose value is clearly much higher than what they're being compensated for, you don't let them just coast along on that contract. You have to be proactive. And even in cases like, let's say Takahiro Tomiyasu, okay, I think this is an example of maybe where it's gone wrong, because obviously we offered him an improved deal. He signed that improved deal, but then he's had even more injury problems, which means he's of less use to us. And that looks like a bad bit of business. But that looks like a bad bit of business with hindsight. The point I'm trying to make here is that with someone like Tomiyasu, what we did was recognize that his role in the squad was much more important than it would have been when he first arrived. And as a result of that, in sort of line with other people getting rises, and in order to keep that harmony and maintain, peace, I guess, within the group, we offered him an improved contract that better reflected his status in the squad. And we've seen Arsenal do that with a number of players in recent years, even when their contracts weren't approaching the latter stages or the critical stages. So, yes, the wage bill's gone up, and it will continue to go up if Arsenal continue to be competing at the top. The more successful you are, the more you're going to have to pay your players. And then the more successful you get, the higher the level of the players that you then go after in a bid to improve your squad. And obviously that means paying more money in terms of transfer fees, but paying more money in terms of wages and contracts as well. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the wage bill is going to go up, and that is something that we have to live with and something that we have to cope with. And I expect Bukayo Saka's contract to go up again. And in Bukayo Saka's case, I think it's undeniable that it's the right move. We all agree that he's a fantastic player. We all agree that, he's our star boy turned into star man, because obviously he's growing older. But yeah, it's justified. He deserves a new contract. I would certainly give him one. We have to be aware as a football club that we are going to pay more. And if we have to take other steps as a club to make sure that we're in a position to do that, then so be it. And it's not me sitting here saying it's fine to raise season ticket prices. I think there are other ways that you should look at first before going down that route. But you get the point I'm trying to make. Costs will go up. Costs will go up. It's just the nature of the beast. And the reason I said it's one of the things that goes under the radar is because I think we go into every summer, and I'd imagine this is going to be the case in a few months' time, obsessing over who we're going to sign next, who we're going to bring in. And the fact that actually we've got 3 really important players going into the final 2 years of the contract, meaning that needs to take precedence as well, and that needs to be a focus for those in charge and those sort of responsible for these things. I think that goes under the radar. Saka, Gabriel, and Saliba are all going into the last 2 years of their contracts. They are all critical components in this Arsenal machine. They are all hugely important players. They're all players, by the way, that we could sell on and make tons of money from. And that's where the club will look at them as a kind of asset rather than a football player. Sounds horrible to say, but that's the reality of business at the very high end. But in order for those assets to be, as valuable as they can be and should be, they need to have relatively long sort of contracts still to run. Now, Sammy Mockbell reported that Saliba, Gabriel, and Saka all have deals due to expire in 2027. Ruak says, isn't Gabriel until 2028? I'm going by what Sammy Mockbell has reported. You might be right. I would need to look that up, but I'm going by what Sammy Mockbell's put in his BBC Sport piece. Is there a contract up to 2027 with an additional year option? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs, but that's what's reported in the piece that we're working off today. Partey and Jorginho, according to Sammy Mockbell, are both due to leave this summer as well as things stand. So that's more work that we got to do. We got to regenerate that midfield. We've got to tie down the players that are really important to us right now. And we have to improve the group and improve the squad. I think we can all agree that needs to happen during the summer window. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to juggle. It's understood, and again, this is according to the report from Sammy Mockbell, that Gabriel Magalhaes has already begun contract extension talks with Arsenal amid some interest from Saudi Arabia. Now, I'd like to think that Gabriel Magalhaes is so ambitious, that Gabriel Magalhaes is so focused on football and loves the game so much that an offer from Saudi isn't going to turn his head. And it's not something that he would realistically consider. But it is something that he might hold up as a bargaining tool when it comes to contract negotiations. Let's say, for instance, and I don't know what big Gabby's on, but let's say, for instance, we're just playing with random figures here to be clear. Let's just say that he wants 200 grand a week. Let's say that that's what he's after. And the Saudis offer him 250. Now, he might not get 250 out of Arsenal because there's something to be said for playing for one of Europe's biggest football clubs and playing in the world's best league versus going and playing in Saudi Arabia. And a lot of players, I'd like to think, still value that and still value it more than just the monetary sort of benefits of going to the Far East or to the Middle East, for instance. So, yeah, but if they're offering him 250 and he's being offered 200, it might allow him, I don't know, and I'm just making the argument here in the case. It's an example. I don't know what the figures are. But it might lead to him getting 225 from Arsenal as opposed to the 200 that was originally on the table because he's going, hold on a minute, I've got a 250 offer from Saudi. So it's kind of a bargaining chip for him. And I don't expect the Saudi interest in Gabriel to be seen by him or his people as anything really more than that. But yeah, Saliba, Gabriel, and Saka, all players that we need to tie down, and we need to tie down soon. So it's encouraging to hear that the club are proactive on that. And hopefully we get some positive news around those players in the not too distant future. Right, really, really short pause. When I come back, we're going to talk Alexander Isak. Is this realistic? The idea of Arsenal signing Alexander Isak from Newcastle in the summer, or is this a fantasy that we should just forget about from now? Save the summer of anguish, save the summer of frustration. Is this something we should just drop as an idea, or could it happen? We'll get into that right after this. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Just a quick reminder, if you're with us live on YouTube right now, leave a like on the video. It really, really does help, more than you would believe. It doesn't cost a thing. Just smash that like button and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel as well if you are new. We welcome everybody, of course, with open arms. If you're listening to us via Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're subscribed on your preferred platform, and make sure that you leave us a review over there as well, because that, of course, also really, really does help. Right, let's talk Alexander Isak then. I've got a bit of a theory that I floated on TalkSport 2 yesterday when speaking to Ollie Klink, who is a huge Newcastle United fan. Obviously, he was in really, really great spirits. Newcastle United had won the Carabao Cup, and he came in and he was calling it TalkSport Toon rather than TalkSport 2. And Eddie Howe's The Social, he was calling it. He was buzzing, absolutely, right? He's well within his rights to be after a 70-year wait. We had a good laugh and a joke. He said, "It's been 70 years." I said, "It ain't been 70 years for you, mate. You're not even 30. But anyway, we were talking about the Alexander Isak thing. And I know, and I use Ollie as an example because I'd imagine a lot of Newcastle United fans are feeling this way. But the way some sections of the media and of the Arsenal fan base talk about Alexander Isak, it's as if he's already our player. So I get why a lot of them are looking at it and going, what the hell's wrong with this lot? He's a Newcastle United player. He's just won silverware with the Toon Army. He's a Geordie at the minute. He's not going anywhere. I get why there's a bit of frustration on their side. But I think from an Arsenal point of view, it's not about being disrespectful to Newcastle United. It's certainly not when I'm talking about it. That's certainly not the angle that I'm coming from. The angle I'm coming at this from is that he would be the ideal fit. He would be the perfect fit for Mikel Arteta's side because he is an all-round phenomenon of a striker. He can run channels. He can stretch teams. He's incredibly skillful, technical. He's got a little bit of edge about him. He's an unbelievable finisher. He's got everything going for him. He is the perfect candidate to solve our long-standing problem at number 9. He's the guy. He is the guy. I just wonder if, having won the League Cup now, and hear me out here, having won the League Cup with Newcastle United, if there'll be a part of Alexander Isak come the summer, should Arsenal or any other big club for that matter approach him, I just wonder if he'll look at the Carabao Cup win and say, you know what? It's brilliant. First trophy for the club in 70 years. My name will forever be in the history books at St. James's Park. Actually, now's a really good time to draw my line under my Newcastle career. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm not sure that I can achieve more with the Magpies. And I told you I'm not being disrespectful to Newcastle, and I'm not. I think Newcastle United are in a really difficult position right now. Have they made progress under Eddie Howe? Absolutely. When he came in, they were fighting relegation. They qualified for the Champions League the year before last. They didn't make it last year, but they look like they've got a great chance of making it again this year. And if he was to qualify for the Champions League in 2 out of 3 seasons with Newcastle United, that would be an unbelievable achievement. They are the wealthiest club in the world right now on paper. But the problem they've got is that PSR and all the other rules and restrictions are hampering them at the moment. As a result of those things, they can't go and exercise that wealth in the way that they would like to. If they could, it would really kind of accelerate the Newcastle United project. And I have no doubt that they would end up being the next Chelsea under Roman Abramovich or Manchester City under their current ownership. They have the capacity to do that. But right now, it's the rules and regulations that are preventing them from taking that next step. Now, we've heard some comments from the Newcastle United hierarchy in recent times to the effect of, we had to have a couple of difficult windows. We had to sell some people. We weren't really able to make major signings. But all of that was to put us in the position where now this summer, we don't have to sell our stars and we can bolster the squad. And if they get into the Champions League, that will help them even more in terms of making cash and finance available to them and making those books look a lot healthier. So Newcastle clearly feel like what they've done in the last couple of years has got them to a much healthier place with regards to PSR. But how healthy is that place? Is it so healthy that they can now go and spend, I don't know, let's say 200 million on the squad and put themselves in contention for bigger trophies than the Carabao Cup, with all due respect? This is the question. And I think if I were Alexander Isak, I'd be looking on with great interest as to what's going to happen at that football club over the next few months. Is he going to start hearing whispers from the ownership, from the people right at the top about what they're planning to do in the summer? And if he likes what he hears, is he going to be more willing to sort of stay put and stay where he is at Newcastle United? Or are we going to get to the summer and Alexander Isak's going to think, based on what it looks like they're doing, based on what I hear they're doing and planning, maybe we're not going to take that next step. Maybe winning the League Cup is the pinnacle. Maybe that's the top for Newcastle United. I don't know. Even when you spend loads of money, ask Manchester United fans, ask Chelsea fans, even when you spend a ton of money, it doesn't guarantee success. But Arsenal are already ahead of Newcastle United in terms of their development overall. I know there'll be critics in the live chat probably that will go, yeah, but they won a trophy this season and we're not going to. It's not it doesn't tell the full story about where the two clubs are at. Steve in the chat says, Harry, with all due respect, the rules may have to change in the summer. Don't forget City's victory in the courts a few weeks ago. Listen, Steve, I can only go by what I know now. And do I think that PSR is going to be relaxed soon? Yes. However, there are UEFA regulations that if they want to play in European competition, they have to comply to as well. So that's another layer. But also, just because Newcastle can spend a bit more money, does that mean that they're instantly going to bridge the gap on the Arsenals and Liverpools of the world? And the answer to that, for me, is no. It's not a guarantee. And so if I were Alexander Isak, I would be getting a little bit tetchy right now. If Newcastle qualify for the Champions League, I think he'll stay put. If Newcastle make it, if they finish in the top 5 in the Premier League this season, because 5th place by the looks of things is going to earn you a Champions League place. If they get that, then maybe Alexander Isak goes, I'm fine here. I'm happy here. That's not to say he's going to cut himself off to every other option or every other offer that comes his way. But, you know, I'm sure he'd be a lot more content with remaining up in the Northeast if he has Champions League football to look forward to. A player of that caliber who's going to be, 26 at the start of next season? He cannot be away from the Champions League. He has to be playing in the Champions League. And it's not just about Arsenal here. I'm talking about Alexander Isak's future in general. What if Real Madrid were to come in? What if, Liverpool were to come in? What if another top European club were to come in and make him an offer that was really, really interesting? And from a Newcastle perspective as well, as great as he is and as wonderful a footballer as he is, if they really do want to kick on and they are struggling to navigate around these PSR rules, bringing in a transfer fee of 120, 130, 140, maybe million pounds is going to ease those concerns and give them the flexibility you feel to go out and start to build a squad. Because what we saw last time Newcastle United were in the Champions League was that their squad couldn't handle it. They had injuries. They didn't have the players to backfill those positions. And they ended up having a disaster of a league campaign after exiting the Champions League early because they could never recover from the strain that Champions League campaign with a very limited squad had put on them. So from a Newcastle perspective, it might be a case of you have to take one step back, which would be losing Alexander Isak to be able to take 2 steps forward. There's no guarantee that Arsenal are going to get him, but is he a realistic target? I think if the price is right, there's a chance. And I think a lot of how strong those chances are is dependent on what Newcastle achieve between now and the end of the season. If they miss out on the Champions League, I'm telling you, this is on. If they miss out on the Champions League, Arsenal would be irresponsible not to, at the very least, ask the question, not to, at the very least, go and make their intentions clear. They've obviously got to convince the player. There's some suggestions that wouldn't be a problem, that there's already been contact in the past between Arsenal and Alexander Isak's representatives. I can't confirm and I can't tell you that's wrong, because the truth is I don't know. I'm just going by some of the rumors and reports that we've been reading from various sources in recent times. But again, the point I'm trying to make is that this is not completely unrealistic. And I just wonder if, having won a cup with Newcastle, which would have been something he dreamed of when he first arrived, because of their situation as a football club, because of the lack of silverware that they've won, 70 years in the making that League Cup win was. Does he look at that and go, well, now it'd be a nice time to draw a line under my time here at Newcastle United? And does experiencing that high with the Magpies make it clear to him and maybe push home the message that it might not get any better than this at Newcastle United? Now, I'm not saying Newcastle won't go on in the next 10 years or whatever to achieve more than just winning an EFL Cup. I'm not saying that for a second. But there are no guarantees in football. And I just think if you're approaching 26 years old and you know that you're the bollocks, and he is, there might come a point where you go, I kind of need to go here. There'll be a time where you get a little bit tetchy. What you don't want to do, I don't think, is do a Harry Kane and stay somewhere for too long, sign a deal with a devil, 5-year contract that you can't get yourself out of, and end up making that move probably at a point where you're a little bit past your best. And, you think about the silverware that Harry Kane might have had and the medals that he might have had he moved a few years earlier. I think, for me, Arsenal have shown in the past, with the Declan Rice deal in particular, that when they want to go massive, if they think a player is worth it, they'll do it. But I honestly believe that even if Declan Rice was 120, 130, they would have done it, because they were that big on the deal. They were that big on the signing. And obviously there'll be limitations and stuff, but Arsenal have kept their powder dry. And so there's no excuse not to go big this summer. I know I keep talking about the other work that needs doing, the contractual negotiations that need to take place with the 3 players we were talking about earlier. Your Gabriels, your Salibas, your Sakas, all of that still stands. I think we have to regenerate in the midfield, particularly if we're going to lose Partey and Jorginho. And according to Sammy Mockbell, that's the way that's headed. We need to bring in another goalkeeper, but we really, really need to bolster that forward line as well. So there's a lot to be done. And if Arsenal go out there in the summer and do a lot of these things, then you'd have to say, particularly if they do the right business and bring in the players that we all think are the right players anyway, because you never know really, do you, until they arrive. But if they do that, then it would kind of be justification for a sort of low-key last summer and a very underwhelming January that's just gone. So, yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. But I just feel like if I'm Alexander Isak, I'm looking at that cup win parade. I'm the hero. I scored the goal that ultimately took the game away from Liverpool. I've had an amazing season. My stock is higher than it's been in ages. Now's my time to move on. And people say, here we go. Ian Dunbar, one of the negatives in the chat, says, FFS. I won't say what that stands for. Give it a rest. If Isak goes, he will have the choice of every big club in the world. Why would he want to play for a club that never wins anything? Alexander Isak is a good enough player to have the choice of any club in the world. The problem is, if Newcastle are going to dig their heels in, not every club in the world can spend north of £100 million to bring him in. There's only a select group of football clubs outside of the Premier League that can get anywhere near that kind of money. One of them is Real Madrid. They just signed Kylian Mbappe. I doubt they'll be going in the market to bring in a high-profile striker again this summer. And the other one, or the other clubs that you would look at as potentially having that finance, are Premier League clubs. We're as well positioned as any other Premier League club in terms of where we are at currently and what we've shown over the last couple of seasons. Man City, it's a rebuild job. They'll be going again. I appreciate that Pep Guardiola's a big draw, but Man City have their issues off the pitch as well. There's lots of things that we could talk about with them. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole on this particular podcast, but yeah, there's only a handful of clubs that can afford what Newcastle are going to demand, and we're one of them. That's why we're in the mix. That's why we're in contention. But whatever happens between now and the end of the season, from a Newcastle perspective, I think it's going to be huge, because I just think if they fail to qualify for the Champions League, that is going to cause him to start to question where they're headed. Yes, okay, he's got his hands on a medal and they've won a cup, but where are they headed in general? Are they actually making progress as a football club, or was that a one-off trophy win in which you wouldn't really read too much into. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but I think it's realistic. I think our chances dramatically increase if Newcastle miss out on the Champions League because of Alexander Isak and his own ambition, but also because of the financial position that would leave Newcastle United in. Qualifying for the Champions League provides them with a bit of a respite and a bit of leeway and a bit of room to maneuver. And that, as I say, works against us because we're looking to take advantage of where they're at financially right now and where they are. I keep saying financially, it's probably the wrong way to say it, where they're at relative to the PSR rules and the UEFA rules and all the rest of it. Anyways, I am going to leave it there. Massive thank you to everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Good news on the contract front. We're being proactive. And Alexander Isak, I'll tell you what, I'm not saying it's going to happen because there's still a lot to happen and a lot to be done. And there's a lot of things that need to fall in place. But I certainly wouldn't shut the door on that story like some people appear to be doing. I'll catch you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Goodbye. Up the Arsenal.